Ladies and gentlemen,
Tell them about the stakes in this election and tell them about their power.
85% wrong direction. What would you do differently? Well, I can't think of anything. No.
The US election has generated more discussion in the outside world than in the US itself. The Israel-Iran issue and the political crisis in the Middle East, the Ukraine-Russia war, and the new Indo-Pacific policy of the United States may bring the foreign policy of the new occupant of the White House the possibility of a third world war. Yes, you heard that right. The ongoing tension in the Middle East and the potentially difficult foreign policy of the US around the Indo-Pacific may become the context of the Third World War. Why are we saying this? That explanation will be in today's video. In today's discussion, we'll highlight the post-election Middle East, and we are also going to analyze how it will affect the developing countries like Bangladesh. There are plethora of surveys and hype around the US presidential election. However, the survey is not the last word here. Take the 2016 election, for example. According to polls, Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the president. Will Kamala Harris take a place in the US history? Or is it going to be Donald Trump who will win for the second term? The territorialized equation is always at the top of the discussion about who will win the US presidential election. Acceptance is also good. Under this equation, the 50 states of the United States can be divided into three parts. Some states traditionally have Republican candidates winning presidential elections. Basically, those states are called red states. The list includes states like Texas, Florida, Ohio, Georgia, Indiana, and Alabama. These states are generally white dominant. In contrast, some states traditionally lean towards the Democratic Party. These are called blue states. Democratic Party strongholds like California, New York, Virginia, New Jersey, New Mexico, and Massachusetts are universally recognized as blue states. Comparatively, the proportion of immigrants in these places is high. It's fair to say that Democrats take a liberal approach to immigration policy. Out of these, there are some states which basically decides the fate of the elections, because the position of both the parties is equally strong in these states. These states are known as swing states or battleground states. There are 7 swing states in this election, the results of which will determine the fate of the 2 presidential candidates. One of them is Georgia. 8 of the last 12 elections have seen Georgia winners enter the White House. The last time in 2020, Biden won the state and went to the White House. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, North Carolina are also on the list of swing states, where the acceptance of both parties is equal. In addition to the state-based equation, the vote of the American Jews and Muslims in every election plays a very effective role in the candidate's victory. Many Muslims may refrain from voting in this election because of America's Middle East policy in the Middle East crisis. Donald Trump, however, is not thinking about them. He is eyeing the young Jewish and overall Jewish vote. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, looks at women voters and immigrant voters, particularly Black, Asian Muslims, Hispanic voters. Despite having some differences, there's one thing that both of them are eyeing for, and that is Israel. While Kamala Harris said that she supports Palestinian self-determination and the two-state solution, Trump has expressed full support for Israel. The question may occur here, why the Jews in the US has so much influence over the election? The answer is simple here. The number of Jews in the US and the power of lobbying groups to influence the elections. Citing research by Professor Sergio Della Pargola of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israeli media said in a report that the United States has the second highest number of Jews at 6.3 million. And that is why the candidates spend a lot of time with the Jews and the Jewish lobby to win. Another very surprising fact is that the Christian Zionists in the US strongly support the Jews. And behind this is the Christian Zionism, evangelical religious theory. Evangelicalism is a popular movement within Protestantism that emphasizes being born again and having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct.
The name of their organization is Christian United for Israel. It was founded by Pastor John Hagee. A Pew Research poll found that about 62 million people support evangelical Christians in the United States. Most of the Republicans are influenced by the evangelicals. There are also hundreds of Congress members within this group. According to CNN report, 28% of the total electoral in the 2020 election was evangelical, and 3/4 of those voted for Trump. Also, the largest Jewish lobbying group in the United States is AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is Republican. Then you understand how much influence these groups have on determining the candidate's victory and defeat. Naturally, they also have an impact on US foreign policy. It is safe to say that these groups control the foreign policy of one of the most powerful countries in the world. Discussions have started on the Middle East issue and Indo-Pacific strategy for the one who will be the elected president in 2024. Either the stability or the instability of the Indo-Pacific region hangs on the US's authoritarian approach to the global arena. But certainly, whoever comes for America will not make any concession with protecting the US trade security and thwarting China's economic and military activities. The most interesting thing is that the name Bangladesh has come up very relevantly in this discussion. The geographical position of Bangladesh is very important for the interest of the US, as well as Nobel laureate Dr. Yunus, who is close to the US in the state policy of Bangladesh after a long lack of democracy in the country. Therefore, Bangladesh is also gaining importance in this election of the US. All in all, the Indo-Pacific strategy seems to be emerging as a new version in the global politics around the US elections. To better comprehend the issue, one must understand the US interest in this region. The epicenter of global geopolitics is now the Indo-Pacific region. The calculation of world superpowers revolves around this region. Despite the war in Ukraine, the US is not taking its eyes off the Indo-Pacific, keeping an eye on China. Because of the US presidential elections, discussions are going on about what will be the future foreign policy for the Indo-Pacific strategy. The Indo-Pacific is a maritime region spanning the Indian and Pacific Ocean. There are more than a dozen countries in this region. Most of the world's population lives in this area. There are nuclear power countries like China, India, and Pakistan. There are also economically strong countries like Japan and Korea. Fearing China's economic and military rise, the Trump administration announced a foreign policy against China back in 2017 to prevent China's dominance in this region.
We don't want them to meddle or interfere in our upcoming election.
With 60% of the global GDP, a potential young working population, and 2/3 of the global economy in this area of economic growth, the US is desperate to gain control over China. On the other hand, India wants relief from China as well. The selling of the US warships in Indonesia, the joint US naval exercise with South Korea and Japan have heated the region for a long time. Along with political unrest in Myanmar and China's influence there, the US is controlling the policy of direct care in this region. The military security alliance of the US, Japan, Australia, and India, known as the Quad, is basically to corner China. Provocations over Taiwan's independence and attempts to bring ASEAN member states into the Indo-Pacific strategy. What will be the position of Mr. Yunus, the friend of the US, in this dispute between China and the US? Even though Mr. Yunus has more affinity towards the Democrats, the relationship between the US and Mr. Yunus is quite good overall. Alliances of superpowers and their rivalries are both blessing and a curse for less powerful nations. For a long time, the US have been trying to prevent the formation of strong bilateral relations with China in the Indo-Pacific strategy of Bangladesh. Japan's assistance in building a deep seaport in Matarbari was a foreshadowing of the Cold War with the US in the last election. Now, the question may rise, then how was Bangladesh's relationship with India, one of America's allies in the Pacific region, was so good? Why did India support Sheikh Hasina in the election despite Bangladesh's conflict with its ally, America? The answer is quite simple, but many people do not know. India has joined the Indo-Pacific strategy mainly to rein in China. China's presence in Ladakh and Seven Sisters is a cause of concern for India. On the other hand, keeping Bangladesh away from China is very important for India to protect trade and Seven Sisters by developing bilateral relations. India has adroitly maintained both Indo-Pacific and bilateral relations with Bangladesh in its own interest. Meanwhile, America wants to bring Bangladesh from bilateral relations with Bangladesh to the alliance of Indo-Pacific strategy. US wants to use Bangladesh as a pawn on a chessboard. Security analysts fear if Bangladesh joins in this sort of alliances, then this will be a suicidal step. China's ambassador Li Jiming, at a meeting in Dhaka back in 2021, barred Dhaka from joining the Quad, and he said, joining Quad may result a very sour relationship with China. Therefore, there's a very strong possibility of a regional conflict spreading. As such, the opinion of security analyst Major General retired Moniruzzaman needs to be taken into consideration. He said, those who are involved in conflicts due to their geopolitical reasons or political weaknesses are the ones who are doomed. This statement of his is very relevant as a warning for Bangladesh not to get involved in this regional conflict. The US will try again to bring Bangladesh into the Indo-Pacific strategy. In that case, the Yunus government has to hold their horses very carefully. Although both Kamala Harris and Trump disagree on foreign policy, the US government's thoughts and objectives regarding this region are the same. In that case, Trump will be one step ahead. Especially if Trump is in power, the conflict in the region will be evident. The Middle East and the Indo-Pacific crisis could lead to World War III. In this regard, Ishwar Prasad, the professor of economics in Cornell University, said that China-US trade rivalry will intensify during Trump's second term. Economic relations between the two countries will be widely separated. And the US-Pacific strategy is now the last hope for the US to pressure China both commercially and militarily. In the 21st century, conflict and genocide in the Middle East, the Ukraine-Russia war, and the US rivalry with China have created negative fears in global politics. It has been seen that the victims of these wars are mainly the developing countries. Bangladesh's main concern lies there. At the same time, adopting a neutral and friendly foreign policy is the biggest challenge for countries like Bangladesh in the 21st century.